In over 3 decades, I've learned that truly great car dealerships are only great because of one thing: leadership. So I'm sitting down with the great men and women inspiring automotive on TimTalks, Automotive Leadership and Beyond. Welcome to yet another episode of TimTalks. We are extremely excited today. We know we say that every week, but listen, as usual, I've got my legal pad here ready to take copious notes, fired up as we start yet another episode of TimTalks, Leadership and Beyond. My guest, a lot of you know him. If you don't, you're about to get to know him. He has sat in literally every chair in the automotive space. He's been a dealer general manager, dealer principal, among a billion other things. But my guest today, we're so happy to have Todd Caputo. And Todd, welcome to TimTalks, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, listen, let's just dive right into it. You know, I think the most beautiful thing in life is we all have a pen, right? And we're all writing our story. For those of you that don't know, maybe tell a little bit of background of your story, you know, how you got in automotive,
Sure.
Obviously decades ago, and kind of walk through, you know, your leadership walk as you continue. Because every place, if you guys don't know, and you'll find out here in just a few minutes, like everything Todd touched was successful. And I don't think that's luck. It's because of his leadership. So kind of take us through that journey several decades ago when you got into automotive.
Sure. So first of all, blessed to have good parents, number one, right? My father, was a dealer. And when I first learned the car business, it was as soon as I could walk. I was given a wash mitt. And I was taught how to wash cars when I was 3 years old, because my dad at the time just had a small used car lot. It was an old Airstream trailer with just a desk in it. And he had a string of lights and about 8 used cars. And he was on every boulevard in Syracuse. That's how he started.
That's awesome.
In 1979, he bought a failing Chevrolet dealership from a widow. The dealer had passed away. My dad bought it from his wife. And it was in a location just outside of Syracuse, a town called Chittenango. And it was an old kind of rundown store. And the late 70s, early 80s was really a bad time to be in the car business.
Mm.
If y'all think that interest rates are high now, just look at your history books of what rates were in the late 70s and early 80s. So he, in a very over-dealered market. So that's where, you know, my dad really learned the new car business. And from the moment, like I said, I was born, I was in the car business. So I was at the old dealership as a kid working there. As a kid growing up, I worked part-time jobs at Wegmans and McDonald's and other places, but always still at the dealership, like always there. Started selling cars when I was 15, 16 years old, worked as a service writer, ended up going to college at Lemoyne College, which is in the Syracuse area, smaller school. Got an HR degree, which my father recommended me to do, which has been very helpful in the car business for sure, right? Knowing HR.
Yeah.
And, while I went to class, I also went to the dealership. And that's when I really started going to car auctions as well. Started going to auctions and I was like 18, 19 years old while I was in college. And I really got my education as far as, starting to buy cars at auctions in the used car business. Graduated from Lemoyne in 1994. Went to the General Motors Dealer Academy in 1995 and started out with a Chevy store, and then ended up buying some real estate that were former Ford dealerships that were no longer had the franchise there. I bought them from Ford Land, and I turned those into used car superstores. And how I did it, really, when I say I a lot, I shouldn't say I meant we, because I was really able to secure some of the best talent in central and upstate New York in the car business, because I treated people really good and I paid people extremely well, and I let them really, really do what they were best at. And I just kind of let them go. I was able to get some great people and build a huge business. And then ended up opening a fourth location, which was a small satellite used car store, but that was right before COVID started. It was only opened a few months. But, when we peaked, I was retailing between 3 dealerships, a Chevy store and 2 used car stores, about 6,500 cars a year between the 3. About 5,500 were used. and the rest were new. The independent used car stores had fixed operations. They had service departments, parts departments. I had a body shop at my Chevy store, had a centralized BDC, 230 employees, a full corporate structure, COO, CFO, and great people. My focus was on inventory acquisition at auctions, either online or being physically at auctions, and marketing. Like those were the two things that I really focused on. And I had everybody else do kind of everything else that they were really, really good at. So 2020, COVID hit, business changed for sure. We survived, and I was either looking to grow during COVID because there were opportunities to grow or possibly be acquired. And really, the good Lord wanted to be acquired. So my dealerships were sold to Sonic Automotive. Sonic bought my used car businesses and turned them into Echo Parks. They bought my Chevy store and it remained Sun Chevrolet. I worked for Sonic on the Echo Park side of the business as the director of delivery center operations for almost 2 years. And I would tell you that's where I really got my MBA, going from an entrepreneur owning car dealerships to working for a public with over 10,000 people for really a great organization. Sonic is awesome. Mm-hmm. That was where I got my MBA, right? And then I left Sonic a little over 2 years ago now. Yeah, it's a little over 2 years ago. And I started a small consulting business because I can't get away from the car business. I love it, and I love helping people. And that's the very short version of my 30 years in the car business.
It's an incredible story, but I want to go way back to when you almost started. I mean, it's one thing, and we've talked about it here. Two things. Well, the first thing I want to touch on, and you said it. And look, you can listen to Maxwell, and you can listen to other great, leaders that teach leadership. As hiring the right people, paying them well, getting them out of the way. I like the law of attraction. Something's going on here, and then the law of duplication. Duplicating a process. And we've had some incredible humans on here explaining that, but that's obviously a lot easier to talk about in settings like this versus doing it. So how did you, Syracuse, New York, upstate New York, is not typically, a Miami, Atlanta, LA, Baltimore, that mid-Atlantic area that is just lots and lots and lots of dealership, therefore draws a lot of people, a lot of talent. So I think, but here's what really will, I think, hit home with a lot of people listening is the average dealership is that smaller dealership. Mom and pop USA, the average dealer in the country is doing, 100, 115 cars a month, right? So how, because you obviously didn't start out selling 6,500 cars a year. So no. How did you, in the beginning, find the right people? Because I think that's so key, is finding the right people. You paid them well, you did it, but how did you get them in the first place? Like, what drawed them to you?
A couple things. Number one, we spent a lot of money on branding and marketing and advertising in that market. And because of that, not only was I able to sell a lot of cars, I also was able to recruit a lot of people. When people see you on TV all the time, because we used to do 30-minute infomercials, I was on TV like 24/7, 365. I was on the radio. I was on digital. We were everywhere, and I was very progressive. Like I started building photo booths 20 something years ago when no one even thought about them. I was involved in digital retailing and things like it. Like usually I've been blessed, right? The good Lord's been giving me the ability to kind of see things happen before others do. And I was very progressive, especially for that market. So people around me that were in the industry were kind of drawn to the fact that I was progressive, that I really wanted to change, that we sold a lot of cars. And, people that came to work for me too, that, the word gets around pretty quick that you pay well. Mm-hmm. People in the car business know it. So, again, that brings in the right kind of people with the similar values to myself, right? The good people in the business, and also brings in some bad ones too that we had to weed out. But at the end of the day, I would say that's really how I did it. And when I got good people to come work for me, typically what they would do is they would tell their friends in the industry too, and they would bring them and they would come work for us too. And that's really how I did it. And a lot of times too at the auctions, like I just recruited people at the auctions. I ran into a lot of very talented people, especially in the used car business, because I was at auctions 4 days a week. I met people there, and that's how I recruited.
No, that's absolutely amazing, and that makes a ton of sense. And kudos, because, it's just amazing for people, so many times people get in that chair or get in that position and, because they were, the old saying is hurt people, right? And the people that were beat up by their sales manager, beat up by their GM, I literally got a proposal lit on fire and threw at me one time back in the days at Toyota. So, I mean, seeing that type of thing, but then, completely doing it differently, it's huge, and that's why people were drawn to you. I do want to talk about, you were the given the name the used car king. So this, this is something very near and dear to my heart. In fact, the most fun I've ever had in the car business is, although I've sat in a lot of chairs, was when I was a pre-owned manager, because there's something special about, and back in the day, before Auction Genius and apps like that, obviously now are 10, 12 years old. But before that, you would get the list of cars at the sale, and then, I'd pull service history, and I pull Carfax, and you pull all that, and you do, then you get there, or maybe you go on a plane and you fly to Florida and you touch them and smell them because maybe it has a smoke smell. But what is the, especially in today's world, and there's certain OEMs that are giving, we don't need to go into that, but there's certain OEMs that are giving more support than others. But obviously, if you have a good used car business that can not only sustain your business, but that can make your business extremely profitable. But again, I had a dealer principal while I was sitting in that chair tell me that the pre-owned manager is one of the, if not the most important position, because you're buying and selling just like stock. So can you give someone, that newer, maybe pre-owned manager, or that GM with maybe a franchise that's struggling a little bit right now based on incentive help or interest rates or whatever's going on in the market? Because, I mean, 80% of what you did was used cars, and that is absolutely incredible. Like, what advice would you give them? But you consistently did it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
There's got to be, I know there's no magic wand, but your day to day, what did you, you had a system. Could you let us peek under the covers there?
I would. So, when I was, very heavily in the business, being able to buy cars at the auction was really, really important, because when you have used car stores that are just independent used car stores, you're not typically taking in a lot of trades that you can retail. They're typically older cars they're wholesale pieces, right? So we relied on buying cars at the auction and buying cars from the public, because we didn't really have a choice. So again, we spent a lot of time at the auction. Now, the business changed quite a bit. I would say the auction part of the business has changed a lot the last few years because of COVID. The used car business, there's been supply issues we all know about. We don't need to waste time going through COVID and supply issues and all that. But acquiring a car at the door is the most important thing that any dealer can do right now. And that's a trade-in, right? You want to own every trade you can possibly own. I think that's number one. You have to have a detailed written appraisal process. It has to be a real process for how you appraise a car, what you're going to take it in for, how much you think it's going to cost to recondition the car, photographs of the car, notating damage. Like, you have to be and you can't miss trades unless you have someone that is completely buried and upside down or unrealistic. You cannot miss a trade, because if you do, someone else is going to get it. I think that's number one. Don't miss trades. And you can pay a little bit more for a trade, obviously, than anywhere else, because of the fact that you don't pay an auction fee, you don't have to transport the car, and it's a plate frame on the street. And it's an opportunity in your service department when the customer comes back, and you have an opportunity to trade, which most people in the business know. Number two, there's the service drive. Right. The service drive is a great place to acquire inventory. Everybody says, we tried it and it doesn't work. It works, but you have to have a person or people to do it. You have to have a process in place that's followed every time. Then you have to have a pay plan in place that pays for that role. And again, does it convert at 20%? No, but it probably converts at 5 to 10%. And I'd rather get 5 to 10% of my used cars out of the service drive than I really would at an auction right now, because the auction market's tough. And then there's your database, right? Dealers don't always utilize the database they have. Most dealers have been in business for a very long time, and equity mining is extremely important. There's a lot of different pieces of software out that you can use. A lot of CRMs already have it built in, and you can equity mine in your database and find people to either trade up or sell their car. And I'm not talking about cars that are 3 or 4 years old. You can even find people that have cars that are 5 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, even older than that Because as you know, a lot of new car dealers are retailing cars now that 3 or 4 years ago, they would have never thought of retailing. Most dealers would have never, you wouldn't see at a Toyota store a 130,000 mile used car. Like you wouldn't see it. That car would go to the auction. But most stores these days, they don't have a choice. If the car is whole, and it's got a frame, it's got a decent body, and it's mechanically safe and sound, a lot of dealers are going to retail that car. So your database is huge. And last but not least is, just we buy cars, acquiring cars from the public. CarMax is great at it. Carvana is great at it. Why can't new and used car dealers be really good at it too? A lot of it, in my opinion, is marketing and branding, right? You have to let people know that you buy cars. You pay more for them than anybody else. And you can't just have a sign out front that says, we want to buy your car. You got to be different. You got to be creative when it comes to getting that lead and getting that person in your door. And then once you either get that lead or get the person in the door, you have to be very efficient in the process of getting them an offer for their car. And the offer has to be all the money in the world, because most customers are smart enough now to know that they can copy and paste their VIN number and information on their car, and they can shotgun it out to CarMax, Carvana, and 8 other new car dealers in the market, and some used car dealers too, and get all different kinds of values. And what I always challenge dealers to do, dealers that hire me to consult, I challenge them not just to mystery shop on how they sell cars to people, but also how they buy cars to people. Like, what's the follow-up cadence? What are you sending out of the CRM? What kind of text messages are you giving? Most importantly, what kind of offer are you giving? Are you giving them a really strong offer on your brand? I'll give you an example. My son's got a Toyota 4Runner, and I said, he thought about maybe getting rid of it because it was bleeding him dry on gas. I said, and my son understands the business because he was in it with me. I said, Anthony, shotgun your VIN around, see what you get. He shotgunned his VIN around Charlotte to about 9 different dealers. He got the lowest offer on his 4Runner from Toyota dealers. Toyota dealers. Now think about that for a minute, right? It makes no sense to me, because a lot of dealers just don't pay attention to the values that they're spitting out and giving to the public. So, and then last but not least is auctions, right? Auctions definitely still have a place, and you can be really, really good at buying cars at the auction. But if you think that you can just sit in front of a computer all day long and buy cars, you're wrong. You have to play in both. I call it the sandlot, right? You're going to play in the sandlot of the physical auction and the sandlot of the digital auction. And if you're going to be at the physical auction, you have to have either yourself or someone that's there that's walking every single car. And you were a pre-owned manager, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. What do you do before you go to a sale? You walk the cars. Mm-hmm. You don't walk cars a half hour, an hour before. You go a day before or 2 days before. You walk every single car that you're interested in buying once you put a bid list together. Plug in an OBD2, bring a paint meter, make sure everything works, because all the arbitration rules have changed now. And do it just like CarMax does it. CarMax has physical buyers at every auction, and they just don't show up on sale day. They show up there days before, and they drive and look at every single one of those cars. That's why CarMax is who they are, and as good as who they are. So you have to be really, really good at it, because you cannot trust condition reports. They just, 100%. For a lot of reasons that we can get into, but we don't have enough time. But that's that again. And last but not least, being in charge of used cars. In any position you're in, whether you're a used car manager, used car director, a sales manager, a floor manager, if you're putting a number on a car, no matter what your job is, you have to be very detail oriented. It's an extremely detail oriented job when it comes to putting a number on a car. And then reconditioning is a whole separate conversation, but that's kind of where it starts is acquisition.
So can you go back to, you had look, you hit the nail on the head. In a lot of dealerships, what I've seen, no matter whether it's a new piece of software or it's, buying trades out of the service drive, you'll have leadership in that dealership, no pun intended, that will try something and they know that they're not going to stick to it. Therefore, that, that's why these things fizzle out, right? They'll try, they don't. But you had a process in your service drive. Can you let us know, like, was it, as you were talking, I'm thinking, well, was it the service advisors? Was it separate people that were in the service drive? Can you walk the listeners through, what your process and your service, because obviously you're successful, your process and your service drive, what did that look like?
So, I'll tell you what I recommend really to dealer clients that I work with now, because the software has changed a lot since I own my stores. But Number one, it's not the service advisor. And it's not having, salesperson A show up there on a Monday at 7:30 and salesperson B there on a Tuesday, right? It's a dedicated person or people, and their whole job is to make an offer to every single customer that comes in for service at the dealership, period. Every single car. Unless they bought it 2 days ago, like they should be getting an offer on their car to either trade it in or sell it to you. Like that's number one. That's first. You got to have software to identify, and it's not that hard. You can tack on bolt-ons to see who's in equity, what the car might be worth, which is not that difficult to do. You can always copy and paste the VIN and put it in vAuto if you want, or put it in VinQ. But then you have to have a process. You have to, how do you meet the customer that's in the waiting area, introduce yourself to them and without being pushy, make an offer on their car. Or most people drop their car off, right, for service. They don't sit at the dealership and wait. They drop it off. So how do you get that offer in front of them? Do you attach an offer to every single repair order? Do you put a hang tag in the window with a QR code on it with an offer on it? Do you leave an envelope on the front seat? I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But at the end of the day, you have to create a way to do it that works for your store. And typically what I'll do is give dealers different options to do that. But you have to have somebody who's responsible, who's very persistent, right? Who can handle rejection, okay? Because there's a lot of people that just they don't want to trade the car and they don't want to sell it. They have no desire to, but there's no reason why you still can't ask them. So you have to be very, very persistent because it's, it's not low hanging fruit. It isn't, but it can be done. And then you have to pay them accordingly, right? Pay them to acquire cars. I believe every person in a car dealership, whether it's a salesperson, a service manager, a title clerk, a parts counterman, whoever, everybody in the dealership should be paid to acquire a car. Everybody in the dealership should get a business card on it with a QR code in the back. So if they're driving home from work and they see a car for sale on the side of the street, they're not afraid to stop and take a picture of it and see who owns the car, leave their card on the windshield with a QR code so the customer can scan it and get an offer on the car. Every person in the dealership should get paid. And that's what I promote when I work with dealers.
That's incredible. And I love the idea. I've even picked up several things here. I love the idea of the business card. Obviously our company is big on QR codes and trade-ins. And ladies and gentlemen, a few weeks ago we had Patrick Abad, and success leaves clues. It just does. Patrick sells 400 pre-owned a month, 200 new a month, but he does exactly what Todd said. Every single person that is doing some sort of service in the service drive, whether they want to or not, are going to get a number. They're absolutely going to get a number. So here we're listening to the used car king. Several weeks ago, we had Patrick who does the exact same thing, and he's selling month in, month out, no matter the climate, no matter the freaking interest rate, no matter what he had to pay, he's selling 400 plus cars a month. Todd's saying the same thing. Listen, people. Hello, McFly. Listen, I mean, why would we not do that? Especially, and quite frankly, me and I, look, you are light years ahead of me as far as a pre-owned guy. We all know the numbers. I mean, there's a considerable difference in your PVR on, a lot of times cars bought at the auction versus cars bought off the street or off your service drive. So I think that is, again, success leaves clues. That happens. It punched me in the head that we had almost this exact same conversation a few weeks ago. Yeah. So if you
Patrick's son, I believe Patrick's son is responsible for it at his store. Yeah, I met him. He's responsible for vehicle acquisition. Smart kid. And Patrick's he's a great operator. That's a great store.
It's a great store.
He's a really good person.
He's a great human. I like to surround myself with great humans. In fact, I'm working a car deal with him right now for my brother, who, by the way, lives in Kentucky.
Perfect.
Is coming down to buy a car directly from Patrick. Listen, gosh, I just can't imagine what my career behind the desk would look like if I had mentors like you, if I had people that I could listen to. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it easier. I can remember being in the store And there comes, especially when you're somewhat successful, especially, when I was at my store, we sold more CPO than anybody in like 3 or 4 states. And you start reading your own press clippings and you start, thinking that you've got everything figured out, right? And I didn't. I wasn't even close. So hopefully these are just giving you little nuggets, little pebbles in your shoe that you can't think about that can make your dealership successful. Todd, as we land the plane, as I like to say, what would your advice? Obviously, you have seen, I have seen, especially you have seen, I've never been a dealer principal before, but the ebbs and flows of this business. What would be the advice that you would give? I like to say with a brand new, but any, whether it's a GM or a pre-owned manager, like what advice would you get on leadership as far as their people? We talked earlier about the right people, the law of attraction, and then the law of duplication of getting the right people and paying them right. But what would your advice to our listeners be out there to that person sitting behind the desk that might be struggling a little bit right now based on market conditions?
A couple things. When it comes to leadership, I just was at one of my clients last week in Michigan at a Chevy store. And one of the managers I was working with there, he's struggling a little bit because of the fact that he's having a difficult time motivating some of the younger people that he's hired, millennials, they call them millennials, right? How do you motivate millennials, right? They don't necessarily care about money. They don't care about the same kind of things that I care about. I think that it's really important to get in the mindset of the people of the workforce, right? And the workforce is younger people. That's who's there now. They were raised and grew up differently than someone like me. I don't know how old you are. I'm 52 years old, right? It's just they're different.
Yep.
So they like to feel like they've achieved something, like they want to make a difference in the world, which I respect all that. I do. So it's not always about money. It's not always about a spiff. It's not always about a commission. To them, I think it's just being told that they did a good job. When I was raised, a good job was, what's your paycheck at the end of the week, right? That's really how I kind of graded myself. I graded myself based on what my financial statement said at the end of the month for my stores. But it's not that way for these folks. And I think that positive reinforcement, celebrating small successes, is really, really important for motivating these people. Really, really important. And teaching them in a positive way how they need to be aggressive, especially when it comes to sales, because you have to be aggressive, but you can do it in a polite way. And also being able to handle rejection. I feel like people that are younger, they don't handle rejection nearly as well. So you have to teach them how to, if they get rejected, not to take it necessarily personally. And to explain to them that they are, when you're trying to sell somebody a car, for example, it's a very large purchase. It's a big ticket item. And people are very, very financially challenged these days. There's a lot of things going on in the world. People are very uneasy with things. So, if they get told a no, you have to kind of like teach them how to overcome feeling bad about it. And more importantly, how to kind of overcome objections, right? And, that's not easy to do, and it takes time. And a lot of the people that are the old kind of quote unquote car dogs in the industry, they don't have the patience for that, and they need to, because they have to learn how to motivate people that are younger. I think it's really, really important that they learn how to do that. They almost have to retrain themselves to be able to do that. I think that's number one. And number two, I'd be ready for anything if I'm in the car business right now. I've seen it all. I've seen 9/11. I've seen 08, 09. I've seen cash for clunkers. I've seen the first time we had $4 gas. You name it, I've seen most of it over the last 30 years. And I would tell you that whether you're a dealer or you're someone who works at a dealership, be ready for anything. And there may be a time when an opportunity can come along where you take advantage of it. And I'll give you an example, right? $4 gas, the first time $4 gas hit. Nobody wanted big SUV. You remember this because you were probably in the business as a used car manager. Yep. Remember, you couldn't give away a big truck. You could not give away a Navigator, a Suburban, an Ford Excursion, those big things. Nobody wanted them, right? Yep. Well, there were people out there, including myself, that bought those things, right? and made a lot of money with them. When the herd goes one way, you can go the other, but you gotta have cash to do it, right? And I think what's happened, unfortunately, to a lot of people in the industry the last few years, especially people that worked in car dealerships, they've made a lot of money the last few years. Really, they didn't really do it because they're that great. They just did it because of supply and demand at the end of the day. Right. And I'm not saying that people in the car business don't work hard and long hours, because they do. And I understand that better than most, just like you do. But I will tell you that nobody did anything special other than the fact that, we were able to charge what we wanted to charge for cars, whether it was sticker or better. People, bought finance products and bought these things just because they wanted to have the car. So $4,500 a copy wasn't because you're all that great, or $5,000 a copy. It's because it was what it was. Mm-hmm. Well, now it's $1,800 or $2,000. What's your paycheck look like? Your paycheck doesn't look like it did a year ago or 2 years ago. How are you living? Did you save your money? Like, it's super important that when times do come that they're good, that you're wise, that you save your money, whether you're a dealer or you're somebody that works at a car dealership. Because what I'm finding now, especially people that work dealerships, they've lived out of their means a little bit, and now they're struggling. I do recruiting, and I work with some large dealer groups and some small ones, and they're running these ads for different positions. And I read the resumes, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe all these people are out looking for jobs right now. You probably see it with your business too, right? Mm-hmm. When you're recruiting, people are out looking because they don't feel secure, and because they need to make more money. You got to be ready for opportunities that come. We got a lot going on in the world right now. We got things going on overseas in Israel and Iran. We've got two major hurricanes that have really messed up the used car market and the new car market. A lot of people have been, displaced. I live in North Carolina. I saw it firsthand this week. Like, I went with a couple friends of mine, and we brought supplies to people. Yeah. I saw devastation like I've never seen. And people mentally aren't there. Not just consumers that are going to buy cars, but people that work in car dealerships too. There's an election coming up we all know about. Yeah. I don't want to get any political conversations, but it's coming. And I've seen these big elections before, and it affects consumers. There's just a lot going on right now. I would be ready for anything, but you have to be very sensitive to that customer that walks in your dealership to buy a car or comes into the service drive to get their car fixed, because they are paying attention to what's going on right now. And I think a lot of people are nervous. You got to pay very close attention to take good care of people.
Well, that is incredible advice, Todd. Thank you so much. As you were saying, I was a pre-owned manager at the time. And in fact, we're going to have Adam Merlin on coming up. But Adam Merlin was a dear friend of mine running a store, and he went out and bought all the big SUVs he possibly could. And I didn't think he was crazy, but I was like putting my foot in on these, and boy, he looked like a rock star, but he did the exact same thing. I hear, I was talking to Heather at Fletcher Jones, obviously a unbelievable organization out on the West Coast. And she was talking about, during COVID and other things, she literally tripled her marketing spend, and then they got more, market share in their PMA. So, guys, incredible conversation with Todd. Thank you so very much for taking. I know you're.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully this has helped you today. That's what we want to try to do, because at the end of the day, I always say it, no one's smarter than everyone, right? Let's just continue to get better together. And there's people that wake up that are victims and the whole world's against them. And they look, based on what Todd said, there's election and hurricanes and floods and, all this stuff going on. But there's also people that wake up and say, how can I get better today? And more importantly, quite frankly, me, Todd and I are both 52. How can I make a difference today? Because we're on the back nine, man. I want to make a difference in this industry that's been so good to me. I want to make a difference in people's lives. And hopefully we can just get a little better along the way. Todd, thank you again. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. I continue to get more texts and people. Sean Niff just sent me a screenshot of his CarPlay as he was listening to last week's episode with Matt at West Turin. Thank you, as this continues to grow. And hopefully we made you a little better today. Hopefully we can get better together. We will see you next week.